Okay, I'm going to call the public hearing to order. This public hearing before Town Council. Apologize to those people that may have been waiting online. We're a little late starting, but we'll get on with it. And full council is present, along with Secretary Reid and Planning and Development Officer Sean Day, who's going to do the presentation on the public hearing. So this public hearing is with regard to the changes that we're making to our land use bylaws and the strategic plan for the town. It's a monumental occurrence in the town. Very significant changes are happening, and I want to thank, before Sean even starts, I want to thank Council and the Planning Advisory Committee members for their work over the last number of months, for lengthy meetings, going through the strategy and the land use bylaw line by line at times, and sort of talking about wording and on occasions, and fine-tuning it. So this is the finished product. We had first reading at our last planning advisory meeting. We had a public engagement, which was not a full hearing mandated by the Municipal Governments Act. So this is that hearing. This hearing is mandated under the Municipal Governments Act for us to hold before council. After this presentation this evening and questions and comments from residents, if needed, there'll be changes will be considered, or additions or deletions or whatever it may be. If not, we'll proceed with it being sent to council for a second and final reading at the end of the month on our normal council meeting at the end of this month. From there, it'll have to go to the province to be. There is a I know a time period after that we still have to receive comments or whatever, as I understand it, Sean, and then it goes to the province for signage by the minister. With that sort of high level sort of situation, our commentary on where we are and why we're here, I'm going to ask Sean to take over and present the changes that we're anticipating.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, everyone. Many of you were here before. I see very few faces I don't know. So I anticipated this, and I decided I wasn't going to do anything like what I did last time, because that was a huge amount of me talking and a lot of detail. And if we went into that same level of detail, we would be here for a similar lengthy evening. And so what we're doing now is we're kind of talking in a more aspirational sense about what we're trying to achieve with this. And the detail can come out in conversation, in questions, or as people take a look at the document if they want to feed us more information before it gets to council, when they would be looking at giving second reading to this, should everything proceed as we hope it will. I do want to really briefly, run through the way planning works. I'm not going to belabor this, but there may be some people out in YouTube land that haven't heard what I talked about in the past. And just very briefly, we have a thing called the Municipal Government Act, and that act, it's hundreds and hundreds of pages long, basically creates a framework for towns and municipalities to operate within. And it doesn't just cover planning, it covers writing your own bylaws, it covers financing, it covers infrastructure, roads, subdivision, all manner of things. And under that large set of documents, you write plans and bylaws that toe the line with respect to the provisions that they have in those documents. And also, you have to stay within that framework. You can't go off madly in all directions. And so it provides a runway for us to work on. Once you get past that, looking at that, which lays out the kinds of things that you can write in a land use bylaw, for instance, it enumerates those. It also provides requirements around your planning strategy. So the planning strategy is the high order document. It's the one where you look at your vision, your objectives, your goals. You bring that down to policy. And that's kind of where that document should stop. It then turns over to the land use bylaw, which is the regulatory body. That's the one where the nuts and bolts largely reside. You still have to go back for guidance to the planning strategy from time to time, because you have to be reminded in interpretation what the idea was. What is the big picture? What are we trying to achieve here? When you get down into the land use bylaw, you're now moving down a regulatory level and you're looking at projects that are as of right, things that are pretty much standard kinds of projects that you would expect to see. When you have things that may be a bit more complex or that aren't a clear fit within the context that you're working in, you can use what's called site plan approval. That's a process that does involve the ability of a neighborhood to be notified, and potentially if they're concerned about a permit being issued under site plan approval, they can actually appeal that to council. So council could make that decision at the end of the day. They could say, yeah, we still feel that the development officer was correct in issuing this, or we feel that there should be some change. Or we feel that they were totally incorrect and it doesn't follow along with the intent of this planning strategy. Then the very next level up is the one that you want to avoid using if you can, because it's very time consuming and expensive. And if you do want to appeal it, you go to what's it called now, Mitchell? It's got a different name.
Regulatory.
It used to be UARB. Yeah, utility, yeah. So it's got a new name, but it's the same board. And that's a far more legal process. So ideally you avoid that. So that kind of gives you a sense of the tools that we have that we can use when we're trying to achieve ultimately the objectives and goals that we're hoping to achieve. One of the most important parts of what we're doing right now is that this is not an entirely new document. What it is a merger of the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan, which is the document that applied to all 5 towns, our own secondary planning strategy, which is meant to fall under the IPS, the Integrated Municipal Planning Strategy, but has the ability to look at some specifics of Westville. And then ultimately you also then get down to what was called the Common Land Use Bylaw, which applied again to all the towns. And so the idea back in 2013, 2014, when they started working on this, was I think they were thinking that amalgamation may happen, and they thought it would be handy to get everyone working from the same book. Now we know that that didn't happen, and we also know very clearly that the towns are very different, and that Westville's needs and opportunities are quite different than, for example, Stellarton's or New Glasgow's or Trenton's or Picto's. And so this is an opportunity for us to leverage our strengths, to really address the challenges that we face, and to do so in a way that looks at things with new eyes, particularly around housing. It was really sponsored because of the housing crisis, but also because the document that we've been working with dates to 2016, so it's 10 years old, and a lot has changed. COVID happened. We have had a big influence or influx of new people moving into the community in the area. There's been challenges in the world with respect to labor shortages, supply chain issues. Price of building anything is very high now. A lot has changed since the initial research was done. So taking that all together, merging those documents, changing them where we felt necessary, and creating our own Westville-specific set of planning documents is what this is about. Down the road, this buys us some time before we do a full new review, which is a completely new look at everything. It would require fairly extensive community consultation. In this one, we are able to use a lot of consultation that has happened over the last several years between the Municipal Climate Change Action Plan, the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan, the work that our planning students did around the downtown, the work that was done by Cycle Nova Scotia in looking at mobility, alternative forms of mobility for the community. So there has been a lot of that going on that has all fed into this. And with that, I will now jump into this because I think I've laid a framework that establishes the kind of confines of what we're doing here. Let's see if this is working. Nothing happening. Yeah, I'll just press buttons. All right, so just these slides are just to kind of give us a sense of what we've been talking about. So the first bit, the catalyst for change, talking about some of the headwinds. So we've got, in Pictou County, we've got an older population. Westville is actually one of the younger ones, if not the youngest one, but at 47.2, it's not that young. We also have, over probably the last 40 years, like many communities, focused on a more sprawl-oriented kind of development where you had single homes on big lots. So that's very expensive for a community to service, but it also doesn't house very many people. It uses a lot of land, however, and it makes for a lot of roads that have to be maintained, which are a challenge to communities. On the other hand, land is relatively affordable here, so that opens some doors. It makes it more interesting for developers to come here if we have the kinds of policies that allow them the flexibility they need to meet today's market demands and the nature of markets today. We also, with Exit 21, have pretty good access to the highway. We have it on McGregor's also. Is that the name of that big road in Stellarton that goes out to the highway? So we have pretty good access to the highway. We are off it a little bit by comparison to Stellarton and New Glasgow, but still, that opens some opportunity. We've been squandering it a little bit with respect to the kind of development that happened at Exit 21. A lot of large pieces of land without a lot going on. So we're trying to retune that zone so that it is more encouraging of the kinds of uses that you would expect to see at a major highway intersection leading into a town. Also because that's the handshake to the traveling public. And if we want to lure people off the highway into the downtown, we need to think differently about what happens at that interchange. There's just not a lot of land left up there at this point. So laying out what we're calling here the 3 pillars of managed growth. So housing diversity is key in this. We have a lot of different kinds of individuals and families with very different needs in terms of the affordability, whether they want a car-free or a car-light lifestyle, whether they want to have to go upstairs or if they're in some fashion comfortable with one-level living. And the more space you require for land, for housing, these things jack up the initial price, but they also jack up the operational costs on an ongoing basis. People that have to have a car or 2 cars are spending somewhere in the order of $10,000 a year on cars if you look at depreciation, insurance, maintenance, and all these things. If you can find a way to house more people in the core, which really is a big part of the focus of this exercise, that gives us more opportunity to house people in a car-light fashion. It also gives an opportunity for a healthier lifestyle because you're using feet and bikes and things like that more to do daily business, which plays in well with our active living strategy that's being developed at this point. And of course, if you are building smaller units, you're spending less on construction. You're spending less heating it and cooling it. And all of that together, when you look at that in the whole, means that you have a more affordable means of housing your citizens. In terms of commercial vitality, I've already spoken a little bit about the commercial highway area and some changes that we're making there. We're also, and this came from the study that was done by the Federation of Nova Scotia Municipalities. Westville was lucky enough to be one of the communities that was studied looking at downtown viability. Downtowns have a rough ride these days. Retail is hard. Banks have pulled out of a lot of small communities, as they did in ours. And keeping a good, viable, vibrant downtown is a challenge. Part of the way you do that, and this was recommended both in the work that Fowler Bald Mitchell did on behalf of FCM, but also our planning honor students who came here 2 falls ago now. They were really big on upping mixed use for the community and finding ways to open doors to entrepreneurs, but also housing more people in the core of the downtown. We've introduced, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later, a new kind of zone, replacing a zone that was turning out to be a dud, the C4 Commercial Business Park Zone. I don't think people are building business parks anymore, and certainly no one has built one in this community. So we've revised that zone, although currently we haven't changed the location of it. It's in the same location, but it does view the kind of development that it anticipates rather differently. So that's touching base on those things. Also increasing, in a small way, the kinds of business uses that can happen within the residential communities that are around the middle of the town or the core of the town. Last one, I was surprised to find that when I looked at our zoning maps, we apparently had no wetlands, which of course we do. And so things like wetlands that need to be mapped and that you need to protect weren't there. So this is opening the door to do that. We have to do some research on pinning that down, so that's something that is to come. We are also studying right now, and this started a little while ago, we're doing an expanded study of earth movement so that we can better pin down areas that may see subsidence, because of course in this town that is a thing, and we need to be mindful of that and not try to promote development in areas that would be susceptible to that. So that probably another year, do you suppose, before we'll have some findings on that? It doesn't happen overnight because you're actually watching very small changes in the earth. And I've often said, since coming to work with Westville, that I see a future in Westville as an energy town again. It's always been an energy town, just happened to be based in coal in the past. But that's not the energy of tomorrow. The energy of tomorrow is geothermal. It could be more to do with solar farms. And obviously, we've got the wind resource too. That may not happen within the town, but certainly other things can happen within the town that expand upon its sort of energy portfolio, the way it can develop energy, and as a consequence, attract business, attract potentially industry, and certainly make it more affordable to run your house, to heat and cool your house. Housing, again, as I mentioned before, is one of the main drivers of this work, and there's no easy way to say this. The old documents made it hard to do any kind of creative housing. It was really focused almost entirely on single-family houses. It did allow more than that, but through onerous development processes, using the tools that are meant for very large projects and applying it to small projects. So we're trying to move away from that and have more as-of-right ability to do what's called gentle density, which will come up again. And get past being a town with 75% of the housing being just single-family housing, which doesn't serve a great portion of our market very well, if at all. So we're looking largely at what they call in planning jargon the missing middle. And so what has happened in Westville has happened straight across the board in North America, where it was like either big apartment buildings or individual houses. And all the other options were largely ignored. And so that's something that we've been studying and opening the doors to in a gentle fashion. This is a nice little diagram that shows some examples of that. So in the back, you've got garden suites or garage suites. So, classic garage with a little apartment above it or a small cottage in the back. Or there's also inside the house the potential for a secondary suite. Or if you take some of our older building stock and look at it, you can find ways to introduce more units within the existing building and kind of work on the architecture to bring it back at the same time. So that's something that we're encouraging within this document, is taking the houses that over the course of many years now have had changes done to them that are not sympathetic to the original architecture. And so there's the incentive by enabling some income generation through creating small apartments within these converted buildings and giving back to the town great streetscapes by making those changes. Maybe it's swapping out a few windows that don't suit the architecture. Maybe it's some paint. Maybe it's some trim. Maybe it's gardens. Not explained very well there, but noted, are flag lots. We have within Westville huge amounts of land that have really poor, if not, in some cases, non-existent access. And so in the past, there were very limited opportunities to do anything with that. So one of the things that we've brought into this document are the ability to use flag lots. And those may have a portion of land that goes right out to the street, or they may just rely on an easement going out to the street. Either is fine. It's a question of managing it. And that opens up those largely serviced core properties that can bring a lot more people into the middle of the town. One of the big changes we made, because it was causing a lot of trouble with kind of confusing people, was we've changed the names of the residential zones to ones that reflect their nature as opposed to an idea about just density alone. So in the past we had R1, R2, R3, and then we had R5 and RR. We skipped R4. So when people hear R1, they think, well, that means single unit house, but it never did. You were always able to have more than one unit in those zones. R2, same thing. They think, well, that means 2 units. Well, no, you could always do more than 2 units in the R2 zone. Same thing, R3, what, we can only do 3 units? Of course not. You could do 20 units, you could do 30 units. Those names didn't really make any sense. And what we've come up with, and I'll just run through them briefly. So the residential core, that corresponds exactly with what was zoned R2. So that area, which falls just outside the next one down, the residential mixed use, is an area where you've got largely, but not entirely, the older, kind of the century homes of the community, on often smaller lots, very organic nature in terms of the road layouts and the sizes of lots. There's everything from super tiny lots to very large lots. And that area is part of the overall core, which is also comprised of the residential mixed-use zone, currently called the C2 neighborhood commercial. That was another one that was causing a lot of problems because people were coming to us saying, well, I'm in a commercial zone now, I'd like to open a car dealership. I was like, well, hang on, you're actually in a residential neighborhood. But they say, well, no, it says it's commercial. So we've gone back to calling that area, which wraps right around the downtown, and we're calling that one residential mixed use, because we've opened to some of that gentle density that I talked about before, a little bit more than was currently the case. We've allowed smaller lots, which is part of the request, or I guess our promise to CMHC and the federal government to open the door to smaller uses, smaller buildings, compact homes, small lots, again, with affordability in mind. And so part of that will happen in this neighborhood and in the residential core neighborhood. But also in the residential mixed use, it's one step just outside the downtown. So it's a place potentially where we could have small commercial uses, or what are called auxiliary commercial uses. And while we still have home-based businesses, which require people to live in the home if they're operating a small business there, auxiliary commercial uses would allow you, for instance, if you had a garage and someone wanted to bake, for example, you could rent a small garage space for someone running a little bakery and selling out of the front of the bakery. So it opens the doors that right now are closed because there are no commercial spaces to be had in our downtown. So if someone wants to start a business here, there's no place to go. And that's not a great way to keep your downtown vibrant. You need to open those doors and get people incubating businesses, which hopefully will be successful and then move into the downtown and be more present in that way. So that's kind of the idea behind that zone. The density is a bit higher than the residential core, and it's quite a bit higher than what was the R1 and which is now called the residential periphery. That's the last zone I want to talk about with respect to those 3 that you think of as the normal residential zones. So that was the R1 zone, largely newer streets with newer buildings relative to the core. And it's the area that people kind of think of when they think about new suburban development. Initially, we're going to call it residential suburban, but for some reason, that wasn't viewed as the right name. So we went with residential periphery. It's our lowest density apart from when you get out into the rural area. It still allows singles and doubles. It's not so hard now to do the auxiliary dwelling units like garden cottages or little garage suites, those sorts of things. They're easier to do now. They just have a set of provisions around where you can put them, how you treat overviewing of neighboring lots, those sorts of things, and maximum size. So the idea there is we don't get into long protracted negotiations and hearings and those sorts of things to do single units effectively. I'm going to jump over rural residential. The one that to me I think has the most potential of being really interesting is what is now called, instead of mini home park, it's land lease residential. And they've always been land lease residential. You don't own your property, you're leasing your property. You may or may not own the home that you're in. What we've done with these is open the door to more kinds of uses within those zones. So if someone wanted to do some tiny homes, for instance, or tiny houses is the way they're described in the Nova Scotia Building Code regulations, they could pair that with a standard mini home development. Or you could have something like triplexes. They wouldn't have to be individually separated units. when you separate units like that, you lose a lot of land, and you also lose heat and lose cooling provisions because you don't have shared walls. So we're looking at that as a very kind of mixed use potential zone. And if people are creative about it, I think we could see some really interesting small pocket communities form in those areas, but all under the management of a land lease community. The last one that we've not really gone very heavily into is a rural residential, where we were advised by a provincial representative that we do have some good agricultural land in the town, which was not mentioned anywhere in any of the planning documents. It's not top quality, it's not like the Annapolis Valley, but it's still viable land. And we have large tracts of land doing basically nothing, fallow. And it seemed like, why not open the door a little bit on allowing some residential uses in those areas, which probably no time soon will become service lands. So this allows people to make use of those lands, and it just makes a more interesting community for that matter. We've had some weird things that we addressed. For example, you could have hobby farms and kennels in the R1 zone, which I think would surprise a lot of people who live in the R1 zone. They would not imagine a kennel, a dog breeding place or something like that, opening up on a lot in the middle of their neighborhood. Or a hobby farm with horses and things. That seems like an odd use in the R1 zone, but so we've moved that into the rural residential zone, which is where you might expect those kinds of uses. And I think, yeah, so that's it. Oh, and we did find a place for small lots selling a few cars, just a couple. Like, this is not a major Ford dealership, but that would also potentially happen out in those areas by site plan approval. That was an area there it made sense to use that particular tool. Throughout the area, when you get bigger, you do move through the tools. So if you're doing a small development, you're probably going to get to do it just by right. But when it starts to get a bit bigger than what is common in the neighborhood, or a bit more complex, or a bit more likely, or where one could foresee rubbing shoulders the wrong way, then we move to site plan approval. And then when you get bigger still, you do move into the development agreement process, so the neighborhood can come out, voice concerns, support, but essentially influence council's decision on whether to adopt or if to adopt with provisions that would implement changes in the agreement. All right. I thought it was important to talk about these two things because these were both in our Housing Accelerator Fund application, and they are expectations from the federal government and CMHC with regard to things that we're going to implement through this process. So compact and tiny homes, or I want to call them tiny houses because a lot of people think of tiny homes as the ones on wheels. We haven't gotten into that yet. That is a different beast. It's not regulated under the Building Code Act, and so very few places at this point have figured out a way to address that, unless they put them in an RV park as a seasonal, as opposed to year-round kind of development. So I should have said homes, not houses there. My bad. We are finding, though, that there are people who are quite happy to live in compact, or in some cases they're called micro-housing, and don't want more. They want a more minimal, stripped-down life. They have a focus on different things apart from, acquisition of more stuff, bigger TVs, that sort of thing. And the other one that we're looking at, and that we promised we would find ways to include, are the ideas of cluster neighborhoods or pocket neighborhoods. So these are designed very differently. They will tend to be on land lease communities because the individual homes wouldn't sit on individual lots unless you did it through a bare land condominium. But these would create a kind of a community that is focused inwardly on itself. And so you would have typically some green space with community amenities. You may have a small cook shelter that people use together. There could be any number of ways that you would design these that would bring community together. There aren't roads going through them. The idea is that parking would be outside that core central area. We have written into this that they will be buffered. You're not going to have just parking lots on every corner when people do develop these. They would have a treescape around them or something like that to buffer the parking. But we're super excited about seeing this, and we have had some people talking about doing these. So that will, again, bring or open the doors to yet another kind of housing that Westville has never had access to before or never offered before. I spoke a little bit about this already. In the downtown core, we're expanding a bit the mixed-use quality of the downtown core. We're encouraging going up, not spreading out. Years ago, they got rid of parking requirements for commercial, and so that stands. Residential still has it, and we haven't changed that. I think the biggest change to the downtown core is a combination of things. When you think about the best downtowns, they are always places where you see a lot of people on foot, and typically they have attractive architecture. Unfortunately, over the course of several decades now, Westville has moved away from that. We want to go back in that direction. So we're going to pay a bit more attention to architecture. Nothing extreme, but there will be, or there are being proposed some provisions around that in terms of fenestration, the kinds of windows, the shapes of windows, the percentage of windows, those sorts of things. And the relationship between buildings and the street. If you have buildings set way back behind parking, that does not make great pedestrian-oriented downtowns. It makes it convenient for a car, but it ruins the downtown in the process. So we're going back to that kind of what was good about the original style of downtown that Westville had. And we're also, again, reducing lot sizes, so there are gaps in the downtown. We'll have more opportunity to fill those gaps with buildings, with uses, with reasons to be in the downtown. And I've already spoken about the highway commercials, so I won't belabor that. This is an idea that unless you're involved in doing placemaking, which is kind of part of my background, you may not have run across this idea of the power of 10. Great downtowns have at least 10 things going on to do at all times. And it's not hard to understand that, but it is hard to achieve it. So reaching that critical mass of the kinds of things that lure you into the downtown is something you really have to work at. And our little pop-up was an example of moving in that direction. I think we're excited about this season with the pop-up, particularly with the gazebo in place now, and I've already started seeing some ads with people that are excited to be there. We need to be very mindful of how do we achieve this? How do we get a lot of great things happening in the downtown, not just one or two great things happening in the downtown? And this is part of planning that was missing in the documents that we've been working under. I'd mentioned a change to what was called the C4 zone, and that was all about business park, a big business park, big paved roads, large scale retail, those sorts of things. I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon in Westville. There's no budget to do that kind of work, and there doesn't seem to be that much demand for it in this area. But we do need a place for the kinds of commercial uses that don't really fit very well in a downtown, that is meant to be smaller uses, mixed uses, have architectural treatments, those sorts of things, and really not suitable for the highway commercial area because we have different aspirations for the highway commercial area. So this is where we came up with the idea of the general commercial zone, not an uncommon zone. They do happen in many communities, but we tacked on this idea of innovation. And this is aspirational. We would like to see this happening. And we've written a plan that will enable it to happen. So for instance, if someone wanted to start producing, I don't know, non-Chinese made solar panels, that kind of thing, or doing research and development, those sorts of things, we would like to find ways to attract them and to house them. And this zone it's anticipated that most people will not be on foot going to this zone, although e-bikes are certainly a way that you can get around any town now. And so it is more car oriented, and it has less by way of there's no architectural requirements, but there are other requirements about siting that make it building first and parking kind of to the sides and the rear, those sorts of things. And we also anticipate that there would be lay down areas in these for the kinds of companies that have to store piles of materials or bundles of materials or pallets of materials. So that's what that one is. It's not industrial, and it's not commercial highway, and it's definitely not downtown. It's a new zone, but it's going in the same place that we had reserved for the commercial business park zone. Industrial, we used to call it light industrial, but if you looked at the planning strategy, it also talked about resource industrial, light industrial, and heavy industrial. So we're collapsing that down. When you think about what we have now, there isn't a lot left, but we do have, for example, Groupe Savoie, which is kind of in the, not heavy industrial, but it's definitely heavier than light industrial. So we've just left it at industrial, and I wouldn't say it's heavy processing. I would actually say it's kind of moderately heavy processing, those sorts of things. So we've left that door open, but there are buffer requirements so that if, for example, you happen to have a residential area close by, we have provisions for buffering around that, setback distances and those sorts of things. That's not one we've had time to study very much because all of our focus was really on cleaning up these documents and merging them and really focusing on the core and housing. So that's one of the ones that we'll be coming back to down the road with kind of a more deep dive on that. This one is kind of an amalgam of a whole bunch of different things. It's talking about what's happening above the ground, at the ground, and underneath the ground. We are getting lots of applications for rooftop solar in residential. They're popping up all over the town. Some of you may have noticed that over at the Sobeys corporate headquarters, they have rooftop solar over their parking lot, which is fantastic on a hot day to go to a car that's sheltered. And it's also fantastic if you've got a car that you can plug into that power too. So we'd like to see more of that. Antigonish is opening a solar farm that residents will be able to buy shares in, and that will reduce substantially their electrical costs. Now that will be different here. This area doesn't have its own electric utility, but there are still opportunities that that sort of thing can happen, and I think they're being opened now in terms of who you can buy your electricity from. And so that could be something, for instance, on some land that is seeing some moderate subsidence and isn't going to be used for anything else. It could become a solar farm, and that's an example of the ways we could become an energy town once again. Same thing with geothermal. They're making huge strides in what they can do in geothermal. Ironically, they're using natural gas fracking methods to find ways to get way down where there's a lot of heat, and then you generate electricity from that. So these are some of the things that are kind of being explored at a very high level right now that could really, over the course of time, fundamentally change the nature of the community in a positive way. We haven't paid much attention to stormwater in the past. That's something that we need to do a better job of because, as everyone has seen, we now have more droughts, but also more intense rain events. And so pretty much everybody around us is downstream from Westville, so we have to not only be careful about how we manage stormwater for our own community, but also with respect to the surrounding communities. So I've already gone through this. This is just a little kind of icon version of the thing. Fast lane, as of right, we're doing as much as we can that way. Low friction, quick permits, for stuff that is kind of standard stuff. So we want to make sure that we're moving that through the pipeline quickly. The site plan approval, medium lane. So there's a bit of friction there, not a huge amount, but it does open the door to some input from the neighbors. And so you use that when things are a little bit complex, a little bit out of the norm. And then the last one, the development agreements, lots of handshakes, lots of paperwork, a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. So we're only going to use that when we feel it's absolutely necessary. Correct, exactly, which we have used. We adopted this a while back, and we started this, the comprehensive development districts, because we wanted to find a way to manage the 21-acre site where the old Highland Consolidated Middle School was. Now, people call it high school, but I understand it was a middle school.
High school. It was high school first. Middle school. Yeah.
Okay. So
Transitions, yeah.
it's like we need a hyphenated name for it then. High middle. These would be used going forward where we have large tracts of land, where someone wants to do a variety of kinds of things, basically creating a community within the community. And so right now, there's one person talking about a pretty substantial chunk of land that may go down this path. And so as it stands currently, we only have the one for the high school lands. And we're actually, even just this evening, talking about some potential development on that site that would fall under that, that zone, which it is now, and a development agreement that's in place for that. Okay, that was my last slide. This kind of emphasizes that we understand the world moves at the speed of business and would like government to move at the speed of business too. That's hard. We don't have a lot of staff resources, but we're trying to create a document that is clearer, easier to understand, has a clear path between goals, objectives, policy, and implementation. And so when we're having a conversation, it's not a confusing conversation as it has been in the past. And to the extent that we can within our resources right now, we will be able to move projects more quickly through the pipeline, but also with more certainty and ultimately in a way that is representative of the needs and opportunities that Westville has. I didn't talk about this earlier, but we saw a need to kind of get back to the idea of the culture of Westville and how we work with that and how we promote more community within the town. And so there are lots of references in the documents to that and how do we get there. And a big thing that we have to do now, today, because of changes that are happening that are well beyond our control, we need to be more resilient. And so that is built into this. And now these are all areas that we have more work to do in, but as a first tranche of that work, it builds us a foundation for that work. And I think that is my closing comment. And I want to thank you. It's been a lot of work, and it's been fantastic working on it.
And no one is more excited about this than Mr. Day, I can assure you, because it's the world he lives in every day. And thank you, Sean, for that presentation. I think it presents it in a different light than what we have experienced before, which hopefully will get the message across as to why we're doing this and what was the driver for looking at changing our strategy and our land use bylaws. And as you said, I think at the very end it's to create that activity in town that I think that we're responding to what we're seeing as needs in housing wise, and what the province is saying, what the federal government's saying about the need for housing and the need to move quickly. And I think that hopefully our desire, at least with these changes, is that it'll make it easier for those things to happen in town, and it gives a clear blueprint for what we envision the town being going forward, the type of activity, type of buildings and developments that we hope to see as a result of this. So it's it's sort of taking, in my mind at least, it's taking stock of what's been going on in the last number of years, what's been what's been coming to us, and putting it in a place in a policy and documents that will enable us to do it more efficiently and more quickly. So hats off once again, I said, to the Planning Advisory Committee and Council for the work that they did on getting us to this point. So with that, this is a public hearing, so I'll open it up to anyone that has any questions or comments on the changes that are being proposed. Silence is a form of acquiescence, to the idea. We'll take it that way anyway. We appreciate everyone coming this evening to the hearing, and obviously there may still be questions that people will have. Those people that are watching on YouTube, I guess we're back on YouTube. Okay, that may prop up between now and our actual movement on moving this forward at our council meeting coming up at the end of the last Monday in the month. So, with that, if there's no further questions, council, anything that anybody has that wanted to question or comment? Hopefully no questions at this time, seeing as you were the architects for this. Okay, and we also have our PAC members with us who are going to be coming back up to the table, because when we finish this meeting, we're going to resume our Planning Advisory Committee meeting, our normal monthly meeting. So with that, with no further questions or comments, I'll declare the public hearing adjourned. And we'll just do a transition to our to our Planning Advisory Committee meeting. And this is open to the public as well at this point in time, so please stay with us.
Voilà. don't know why my little gizmo didn't. Oh, you know what? Forgot about that. I only used it one other time before. Yep, every time. Here, I'll give you a mic. So you can say pithy things.
We just returned to PAC. Yeah. Right here, so it's approval of minutes. Okay, continuing on with the PAC, could we have the approval of the minutes of March 16th, or March 18th, pardon me, of 2026?
Maxine moves.
I'll second it.
Motion moved and seconded. Any question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Updates. Sean,
Sean, you're back on.
are you back in?
Updates.
Updates.
Well, I mean, I think we've been going through the updates. Trying to think if there was anything in particular. I finally received the Schedule A from the lawyers for the Union Street thing. We were waiting on that before it could be signed, the Union Street Development Agreement for the 16 townhouses. So I've sent that out to Mr. Weirs out in Ontario, and he will sign a couple of copies. Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
Can't hear.
We can hear you, but folks online can't.
Yeah, you're going to have to go back to the microphone.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
And I should comment, by the way, that CAO Weirs is online from Ontario, taking in this meeting. So welcome, Scott, back to the meeting table.
Is he? Is he with us?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So what I was mentioning is that we have received the Schedule A that we were waiting on. Unfortunately, it came in after Mr. Weirs left, so we weren't able to pull that together in time for him to sign here. So it's just going to get couriered back to us, at which point the mayor will sign and we'll get it registered so that they can move forward with that. The same people are interested in doing several other developments around town, but I'm not in a position to talk about those currently. The same thing with respect to the Highland School. We're in discussion on, projects at that school, and we're in a lot of discussions with a lot of people about a lot of potential projects, but none of them have come to the point that I can bring them forward, unfortunately. The good news is that there are a lot of people who are interested in doing development in Westville. And they are all, based upon what we are presenting this evening, very excited about what we're proposing, because they see that as a path forward that makes it more attractive to come here and do development. Were there any things in particular that you wanted to ask me about in terms of things that we've been discussing over the last while? And if not from me, perhaps Mr. Weirs, who is lurking in the background, may have some comments.
Mr. Chair, if I just may, through you to Sean, just an update on what's happening outside the council chambers here
Absolutely.
on Drummond Road, the project on Drummond.
Right. So the project is a go right now. I actually got timing today in terms of when we can expect to see houses showing up. So the first group of 3 houses, it's expected that will be showing up in late May. And it will take about a month to have them all zipped up and ready to be occupied. And so then we expect the next tranche of houses, which would be in the middle, to come kind of in the early July range. And then the last group of 4, which would be at the far end on the eastern end of the project, would be expected somewhere in August. As you will recall from the development agreement, the idea is that these not all look the same. And so they've got to decide on how to mix the color combinations, the nature of the entries that they'll have, and there are actually a couple of different sizes. They don't change by much, but they are different layouts inside, which causes them to be shorter or longer, depending. And so, in theory, if that holds true, we should see the project wrapping up by September, October in terms of the final occupancies being issued and all the groundworks. I know there was some concern about the knoll on the corner down here. That work hasn't been done yet, but it absolutely would be done because it's a requirement under the development agreement, and it was approved by WSP, an engineering consulting group, in terms of providing adequate site stopping distance for people coming from the east. So that's exciting. I know there's a lot of interest in it.
Could I also say, Mr. Chair, people, I know that we're getting inquiries downstairs at the office, and I know people are asking, well, you know, these homes are going to be for sale. Where do I, you know, how do I get the information on them? So I don't think it's been made public yet, but the company can shoot me if they wish. I worked with this company for a number of years, so I'm going to say it anyway. I'm going to put a plug in for them, actually. So the homes are going to be, it's a Shaw development, as most people, we've referred to it, but the local retailer for Prestige Homes, Stone's Prestige Homes in New Glasgow, who will be selling the homes. They'll actually be the people that will be showing the homes and selling them to prospective buyers. So, I think that you're probably going to see, I don't know what's going on with this, Mike, I'm sorry. You're probably going to see some activity, some information coming out from them, I would think, in the very near future with regard to the homes. Because, you know, I think people are inquiring as to what do they look like, what's the price point, all those questions. And, you know, we don't have the answers. We're not selling them. The town is not selling them. The developer's not selling them. In fact, you know, the retailer, local retailer, who is Stone's Prestige Homes, will be selling those units. So Stone's, you can expect a lot of calls tomorrow morning.
One thing that I haven't talked about before, and it's only a short little conversation, one of the things that extends from using site plan approvals and development agreements is you actually have to go out and check on what's happening periodically to make sure that the people who have signed off to these things are doing what they said they would do. And we have a number in town right now that are not where they're meant to be. And so that's something, once the dust settles on the work that we've been working on, I'm going to be going around the community and having some conversations with people about, you know, putting in place the plantings and landscaping and fixing parking and those sorts of things that they're obligated to do under their site plan approvals. It's not the fun work.
But it's necessary work.
Yeah.
We've been down that road before with the developer, and we know what that leads to if it's not done properly.
Sean, was there a conversation about road reconfiguration for Queen? Was that a conversation that was had earlier?
The reconfiguration of the intersection
Oh,
out
at the
here.
intersection, okay.
That was a discussion
So,
point.
right, on that, rather than, again, in order to try to keep the cost of the houses down, Shaw and Clayton were very careful about every decision. And one of the decisions that they thought they could manage in a different fashion was, rather than sorting out that exit, or that intersection rather, where Queen meets Drummond, they would move the house that was that area of concern down to the far end. And so they acquired extra land from Pioneer in order to do that. And then I pointed out that we needed the traffic safety summary to be updated, and we received that fairly recently. So we have that where it is needs to be.
So all of that means that the intersection will remain the same as it is currently for some time, at least, anyway.
Yeah, I think that we probably should still consider getting rid of the slip lane, because it's not good for a number of reasons, and it could just be a standard intersection at that location.
So,
Maybe a three-way stop sign.
Absolutely.
I know.
Yeah, no.
I'll be getting the emails tomorrow.
no, that's you said it, not I. Just, I forgot what I was going to ask. Oh, the question. So you're saying that the WSP assessment for sightlines has been updated?
Yes.
To incorporate that moving. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Anything from Mr. Weirs?
Can you hear?
No, I'm fine.
He's-
No, her story.
You've done a great job of summarizing that. I think there are, on the pop-ups, there is some activity there, looking for people looking to rent those pop-ups. So we'll continue to watch that and hope that we have a full house by the time that the summer arrives.
Scott, who's approving the tenants in those pop-ups? Because I know we ran into some concerns last year.
Yeah, well, they'll be coming in through the town office, and I'll be working with Kristen when they come in to take a look at what they are and what they're proposing and that sort of thing. Yeah, so it'll happen, in the administration office.
We should point out, Scott, that we've, or you have, looked at the contract, if I can call it that, for the people that are there using the facility. One of the concerns I think that people had was the uncertainty of the hours and when they were there last year. And I think we'll see a great improvement in that this year, because we'll have the full year to go. But it was just a start, of the process. But there was some concern that the people didn't know when the people that were using it, the people that were actually there, the merchants, when they were going to be open. So we're trying to establish some more certainty around
They
that.
actually posted on Facebook,
Yeah.
on the pop-up site today.
No, that's not the pop-up site.
Is that not there? That's the other site, but I think they do have their days that they're looking at there now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a challenge to be frank. Thanks for the mic, Kristen. It's a bit of a challenge to herd the cats on this thing. So and last year was, one, we got a very late start because the money didn't come in on time and all that kind of stuff. But we did learn a bunch of lessons, and what I tried to do this spring was take those lessons and apply them to a revised contract that will, a couple of things. I was probably asking for too many hours last year, so we've reduced the number of hours that they are obligated to turn up. And we've refined it on the basis of the seasons. And I think what that'll do is it'll focus everyone into roughly the same hours. And that, I think, is an important thing, because what happened last year was that, Bill came in at 9 and closed at 12, and Martha didn't come until 3 and stayed open till 6, and et cetera, right? And so it was kind of catch as catch can. Now what we're saying is you need to, fewer number of hours that you have to make up, but you need to be more focused on when those are, and you need to be clearly establishing what those hours are. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, this summer we will we have funding to have somebody actually manage on a part-time basis, kind of manage what I would call the kind of the event side of things there. So they don't manage the pop-ups, that's not their job, but it is to use the new gazebo space in a way that, encourages vitality on Main Street. So, I don't know, I'm making this up now, but it could be karaoke in the gazebo on Wednesday nights or something like that. And so we'll have a little bit of money to be able to retain somebody on a part-time basis to do that kind of community programming, which should, in theory, attract people. That was the logic of it. Should attract people to the pop-ups, which should drive up the incomes of the people who are renting the pop-ups, and make it more interesting for people to come and shop there. So hopefully those things all work together. But again, it's very early days in this thing, and we're still learning as we go. But I think we learned some very valuable lessons last year that we're trying to apply this year, and hopefully, we do a better job and make it more interesting for both residents and visitors to Westville, and frankly, more profitable for the people who are renting the pop-up units.
And Mr. Chair, if I can ask one more follow-up on that, and I don't want to get to the end of the story or the end of the season, but have we told them when they are closed for the season? I know there was concerns last year. You know, I know it's weather dependent, but there's, you know, we're not maintaining it when the poor weather comes, and there's a significant liability if they're going to be open. I know it's used at your own risk, but that's just not the way that we should be doing it. I think there needs to be an end when they're going to close, and then it's going to be closed for the season, right? Because last year didn't, in my mind, it didn't work out well, and I think there was a lot of risk on the town by allowing them to be open at their own peril. It's still town property.
So there is an end date, and it's the end of the end of December, and the reason for that is the tenants were very clear that run up to the Christmas period on weekends is very important to them. So there is no expectation that they're open during the week, you know, after, and I've forgotten the exact date, but, you know, the key season is between June 1st and September 1st. It then moves into the shoulder season for September, October, and and then into the kind of winter season, I guess, or lack of that, fall season, through to the end of December, so that they can capture the Christmas market. But, you know, at the same time, you know, if you get a dump of snow of 30 centimeters on November 15th, you know, that's it for the season, and it stays. That's it for the season.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions?
Do we take a motion to accept his report?
Motion to,
I can't remember I think we should probably have a motion just to accept the report from the planning director.
I'll move to accept the planning report as presented.
I'll second that.
moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Delegations on issues or discussion arising from the business or other business. Nobody has anything?
Public engagement. I think that's it.
What's that?
Is that public engagement?
Yes.
Yeah, public engagement.
That's the public engagement.
Yeah, it's a long title to mean public engagement,
Yes.
which means that anybody has any questions or comments, now's the time to make them,
We should shorten it.
right?
Yes. Hearing nothing? Okay.
Just ask Sean a question.
Sure.
In regards to what you said about the street over here with the new development across the road here. Was the, you're going to have an intersection there that there's not going to be individual driveways out onto the main street? It'd be
Yes.
behind it'd be a road and then be one street out?
No, these ones will be developed just like the houses on Lower Drummond. They'll all have individual.
They'll all have individual driveways, will they?
Which is kind of the reason why having a stop sign, a three-way stop there would be good, because there's going to be a lot more activity in that area than people have become accustomed to.
So there was no thought of putting like a lane behind the homes and they all exit out one way?
It was discussed, but at this point, it's kind of a trial run to see if this kind of housing is going to be something that Westall's interested in. They do want to, in the future, if it proves popular, to do more development going further in. But at this point, they didn't want to invest in a whole other road mirroring Drummond in order to come out that way. So it was not viewed as different from other parts of town in terms of the access points onto the road. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anybody with anything they wish to bring up? All right, having finished that, then can we have a motion to go in camera?
I'll move to go in camera.
I'll second that.
Motion's moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Motion carried.